District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Give me a break, give me a break. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. Give me a break, give me a break. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. That chocolate crispy taste gonna make your day. And wherever you go, you'll hear the people say, give me a break, give me a break. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. Have a break. Have a Kit Kat.
Welcome to District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. Friendly reminder, I am speaking at the Daily Caller Live event on American manufacturing and innovation. You can catch a live stream of it starting at 9 a.m. Eastern. There will be a replay on YouTube. I will be sure to include the link in the show notes if you're interested. Today, I want to bring your attention to that American Rivers report that claimed the Potomac River is the #1 endangered river in the United States. They cite factors like data centers and data center runoff as a reason for why. Then I will go into previewing my upcoming trip to the International Order of T. Roosevelt Summit happening in Florida and what I hope to take away from it, and some key findings and observations that I will relay back to you next week on the podcast. American Rivers, if you're unfamiliar, and there's lots of environmental organizations, it's honestly very hard to keep up with all of them. I have seen this list circulated over the last few years, and it's not surprising that they listed the Potomac River as the #1 endangered river due to the Potomac Interceptor spillage, where millions, if not billions, of sewage, raw sewage, dumped and filtered into the Potomac. A very big problem in which the EPA, Army Corps of Engineers, and even the wider Trump administration has had to get involved. We will likely see the firsthand impacts of that in the coming months. Did we see a lot of fish kills? I'd seen reports of fish kills a little bit below me in my section of Northern Virginia. I live a few miles away from the Potomac River, and there's a section below my portion of Nova where there were reports of, in a state park, lots of dead shadfish that had washed up on the shore. This organization might not be familiar to you if you're not in the DC area, and I've still had to learn about it, but I'm quickly going to scan some of their action items and positions that they've taken. There might be a couple I agree with, but looking into this even more, I find myself disagreeing. And that doesn't mean you have to dismiss their warnings about the Potomac, because the Potomac, to me, is not safe for swimming or eating fish out of, and that is because of legacy pollution. They have taken position, American Rivers, on no mining in the boundary waters, and I have gone back and forth between that because that is a sensitive issue. And then I also support and sympathize with a lot of the mining claims. So I have not taken a formal position on the boundary waters for this reason. It seems they're opposed to the roadless rule repeal, something that I am in support of because you need to have some roads that go into the Tongass. I've been to the Tongass. I did a report on the Tongass a few years ago, and I disagree with that, keeping the 2001 roadless rule in effect. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think they support changes to the Waters of the United States rule, which basically deems every body of water a navigable water. And that is very foolhardy because you then have private property rights encroachment, and everything would then be a navigable water subject to regulation under the Clean Water Act. And that is too onerous. Here is the methodology for the 10 top most endangered rivers list, and they've trademarked it, interestingly enough. So the Potomac River has earned the coveted #1 spot as the most endangered river in America. They say in the unenviable lead position on the America's most endangered rivers list, this year is the Potomac River. The river, threatened by both data center expansion and pollution, exemplifies how the compounding threats our rivers are facing can collide, creating impacts that can reverberate far downstream. Each year, in partnership with local advocates and communities, the report draws attention to urgent threats and the solutions needed to protect the rivers that sustain us all. At a time when new and emerging pressures are reshaping how we manage water, acting now has never been more critical. So their explanation for why they gave the Potomac River the #1 spot. The rapid, unchecked buildout of data centers along the Potomac River threatens the drinking water for our nation's capital and surrounding areas, while historic spillage sewage spillage, raises alarms about aging infrastructure. Now, I'm not trying to dismiss the water usage concerns of data centers, but to me, I think more problematic and more troubling for the Potomac River is legacy pollution, local mismanagement from DC. This recent sewage spill, data centers maybe account for about 12% of water usage. And then I would say cities are the ones that are consuming water mostly. Very similar to what happens in Florida. In urbanized areas, that is who's typically consuming the most water. Not so much data centers yet. And I will go into data centers a little bit more in their water usage shortly to kind of calm concerns about what they are. And again, this is not me tacitly endorsing this, but I have seen a lot of fear mongering done by environmental groups because they're bitter about losing renewables support in the form of subsidies. That is why they've taken their anger at data centers. And data centers are constantly being innovated, and they can't be sited everywhere because they have infrastructure that is necessary. And our region is number one for data centers because of the fiber optic network that we have here, the May East fiber optic network. Interestingly, DC and Maryland officials dismissed this labeling, according to the Washington Times. Maryland officials are disputing a new report identifying the Potomac as the nation's most endangered waterway, while leaders in the district acknowledged they were unaware that the Potomac had earned such a lowly title. The Maryland Department of the Environment said the Potomac is healthier today than it was a generation ago, barely 3 months after the Potomac Interceptor spill that flooded the river with close to 250 million gallons of untreated human waste. Maryland leaders say, and Maryland is run by blue staters, that the American Rivers Report ignored the state's ability to recover from the January rupture of the Potomac Interceptor, which is believed to have caused the largest sewage spill in U.S. history. The state agency said to the publication, while the Potomac Interceptor collapse was serious and required immediate response, it was an acute, localized incident. Water quality monitoring shows conditions improving as repairs and cleanup continue. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser said that she was unfamiliar with the report about the endangered status of the Potomac River, and Washington Times cited an excerpt of the report. Many of the region's water pipes, particularly in and around D.C., are approaching or have passed their 50-year service life. Potomac Interceptor sewage pipe is over 60 years old, so the report, co-written by the Potomac River Keeper Network and Nature Forward. Failure to address aging water infrastructure on the Potomac puts the river at risk of ongoing contamination and threatens public health, local businesses, and wildlife. And a Washington Post report, funny enough, actually found that they were due to update the Potomac Interceptor in 2007, but because of environmentalists refusing to allow permitting reform, they were not able to get an update due to the lack of a permit to approve such improvements on this infrastructure project. Unsurprising. Now, Washington Times continues that compounding the immediate issues presented by the cleanup are the side effects of D.C. area becoming a hub for data centers. They write that more than 300 data centers are situated within the river's watershed in Maryland and Virginia, and plans call for building 1,000 more facilities in the region over the next few years. They require a large volume of water to cool their machinery. American Rivers said the proposed sites are upstream of the sewer line collapse and put greater stress on the area's drinking water supply. They say that contaminants from the data center's hardware could enter the Potomac and urge local governments to take greater interest in the river's health when making decisions. The report added this lack of oversight creates dangerous gaps in understanding how these facilities affect downstream communities, ecosystems, and drinking water system treatment costs. I think it's very easy to scapegoat data centers here, but like I said, there are other factors that have been complicating things for the Potomac River: legacy pollution, mismanagement, no permitting reform, aging infrastructure. Could data centers have a negative impact in the future? Potentially, if they're not careful, but data centers are constantly being innovated, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here. You don't have to defend data centers to understand this, but most data centers that are being built today, including the very controversial hyperscalers, which everyone is criticizing, most of those are being built with a closed-loop system. So what does that mean in layman's terms? I have a report on this as well with IWF on data centers in the environment, where I offer a nuanced look into the build-out of these infrastructure projects and why I think you can conserve resources even as they are resource-intensive and heavy with constant improvements and the like. So a closed-loop system recycles this water that is used, and it prevents it from spilling off and running off into nearby waterways and watersheds. That's what it is more simply. Data center companies and even tech companies that have data centers are very mindful of the footprint and impact that their project can have. And what they try to do typically with some few exceptions, is have community buy-in and ensure that their projects do not threaten watersheds, sensitive land areas, and the like. There have been some attempts to quietly approve projects without consent of the local communities, and there have been communities that have not welcomed these projects, communities that have welcomed these projects. And with respect to water and water usage, I think the numbers that they use are very misleading. They talk about 5 million gallons a day for the hyperscalers, and when people hear that figure, they start to get very nervous. However, with a closed loop system, which is what most of these facilities are adopting and being retrofitted with, you will not see these runoff problems that this American Rivers report is putting out there. And it's very easy to use the data center talking point, and they were caveating it with the spillage and legacy pollution, which tells me it's a very easy thing to raise money on, raise alarm on, get attention with, because it's a attention-grabbing headline. Oh, data center water usage is going to be making the Potomac River more endangered. But if you're saying that to obfuscate other factors that have made the Potomac River weaker, like I said, there were talks and even bragging rights by Potomac River keepers that we're going to have a clean river that you can swim in by 2030. I don't believe that for a second with how much soot and unclear the water is. Like, I'm someone who likes to swim in rivers and bodies of water, and I would never swim in the Potomac in the section below Georgetown through Old Town Alexandria. Never in my wildest dreams would I do that, due to especially the recent sewage spill off. I want to see more proof that data centers are actually polluting the rivers and our waterways more. Like I said, even though it qualifies for a small percentage of water usage, the sewage spill that happened in January is far more problematic and alarming and threatening to water quality than data centers to me right now, because I need more proof. I'm going to read a paragraph or two from my new report about water efficiency of these hyperscaler data centers, which do consume quite substantial amounts of water. From my report, it's a policy focus at IWF. Feel free to read it. I write that water is used for cooling systems in data centers to absorb and dissipate heat from IT infrastructure. This heated water is then moved elsewhere and is often released back into the environment after any necessary treatment. Water usage effectiveness, WUE, measures the total amount of water used at a data center against its energy consumption. So the lower the ratio, the more efficient its water use. The industry average WUE value is 1.8 liters per kilowatt hour. Water usage at data centers is equally determined by the following factors: location, climate, water availability, size, and IT rack chip densities. To mitigate potential impact from direct and indirect water consumption, data center operators have evolved from evaporation-based cooling systems to closed-loop-based cooling systems. This change reportedly reduces reliance on freshwater by 50 to 70%. Amazon, for instance, uses a closed-loop liquid cooling system, the in-row heat exchanger, in its data centers, and it's 20% more energy efficient and uses 9% less water compared to rival cooling systems. So the industry is constantly innovating, and this is not me doing PR, this is me trying to be objective, to say that what is endangering the Potomac River most? Mismanagement, legacy pollution, this recent sewage pollution from the Potomac Interceptor. Because again, a lot of people see data centers. It's a great lightning rod issue. It's a great thing to alarm people about. Great for fundraising, stoking fear, etc. All the while, the industry is constantly innovating to conserve water resources, not be a blight on the landscape, and make sure that they have buy-in from the community. Because whenever you approve a project, and this will have to go through environmental review. It might be expedited like other energy projects are because of the timeliness of this for national security reasons. However, these projects still have to be approved in the county level. If they somehow involve federal approval, then they have to also go through that. So it's not like they're going to skip over the approval process and recklessly endanger water quality, energy, land usage, and the like. With it being 2026, if these companies are building infrastructure projects that are a blight to the landscape, pollute water, and the like, they're not going to exist for long. It's very counterintuitive to say that your project is going to harm the environment. And why would you want to proceed with that if it is a potential harm to the environment? It would make no sense. And I will have more episodes on data centers and their energy and resource usages, I think, going forward, because it does need to be talked about more. And they're actually limited with fiber optic networks. So that's why you're only seeing them pop up in a handful of states. I like the Potomac. I have fished from the Potomac. I believe in key waterways. I am a little skeptical of American rivers and what they stand for I don't support dam removals. In most cases, I think it actually would be a net negative to salmon populations if they're advocating for it in the Pacific Northwest. Sea lions and shamu, killer whales, are more threatening to salmon than a dam. Studies have shown this time and time again. And I want the Potomac to be healthy and clean and vibrant and potentially swimmable in the future, but I don't think you could drink from the Potomac, although they do treat water from the Potomac, which can be consumed later. That is what they do with the Interceptor. I believe that's what part of the function is. But the data center scapegoating is going to be very common among, let's say, climate alarmists going forward in a lot of these groups because they need a new boogeyman to scare people over. So I encourage you to do your research. Again, I'm not a wholesale defender of data centers. I have questions. I don't think they should go at sensitive places, especially public lands or sensitive water grounds. And they won't be sited there because there's unlikely, a fiber optic network that can support it there. And you need a strong grid as well. Calling for cautious development of data centers, I think, is fine because a moratorium would be foolish, in my opinion. Don't want to do that because do you know who's pumping in money? This is proven with a report out from the Daily Caller. China, who is no friend to the environment, is pumping in millions of dollars for disinformation campaigns on data centers and their environmental impact as well. So you're seeing that division being caused by bad actors like that here in the United States as well. So take a lot of this information about opposing them with a grain of salt. Yes, they are resource heavy, but with how they're innovating, they may not pose a threat as a lot of these groups are saying they are. And unless you're willing to give up all your technology, your phone, your emails, your Netflix streaming services, you are contributing to AI demand of these data centers because data centers are storing and processing every interaction you do that I listed. It's your interaction with the data center because you can't have these activities happen out of thin air. There has to be something that backs it up. Very similar to energy consumption. Electricity does not come out of thin air. Something has to undergird it. And with all these digital interactions that we have, it's us interacting with data centers. It's an inconvenient truth. But unless you become a Luddite, you are contributing to data center demand, which is a paradox in itself that a lot of people are going to be wrestling with. That is my reading into the report. I do partly agree with it, but I don't think scapegoating data centers is going to help raise awareness because, again, it's the latest hot scapegoat. All right, now on to the IOTR Summit. I'm so glad I'm finally able to attend this event. I've been trying to go for a couple years. I believe this is their third summit. It's in beautiful Southwest Florida, one of my favorite regions in the country. And they have a lot of things happening. They have a keynote by Fox News anchor Brett Baer, who just wrote a book about Theodore Roosevelt. Attendees are going to learn about their initiatives, their efforts, what they're doing to help promote the right to hunt and fish and support other conservation-related initiatives and efforts around the country. But namely, I believe there's going to be a chief focus on their advancements in the right to hunt and fish amendment space. Luke Hilgeman, Kenya Link, all the other staff members of IOTR, big fans of them here on the show, and I've grown to be friendly with them over the years, and I like what they do. So I'm very privileged and honored to be attending their summit finally, and I will have some key takeaways from the event from sunny Florida when I return with you all to the program next week. It's going to be a great event. I can't wait to share with you my findings, interesting discoveries, and perhaps things that I was not aware of, perhaps some new initiatives that I can report back to you all here on the show. But check out IOTR in the meantime to learn more about them. They are doing yeoman's work with conservation, especially as it relates to hunter conservationism. If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.